I can't be seen as weak. It's one of those that I keep hearing time and time again. And as a trauma therapist, I can tell you there is nothing weak about somebody coming to me to say, I need to face the things that have been the darkest times of my life again, to be able to overcome them.
Welcome to the Silent Epidemic by Omnia Therapy. I'm your host, Hatice Mehmet-Quirk. Today I'm joined by Dr Kat Aguilera, a trauma psychologist specialising in psychological risk management for high-pressure organisations. With over 14 years of frontline experience across NHS, crisis response, HM prison service, emergency services and military settings, Kat works with leadership teams to identify and mitigate psychological risk before it becomes a crisis. Her work is grounded in extensive clinical experience treating frontline trauma across police, fire and ambulance services, alongside specialist trauma work with Combat Stress, the UK's leading veterans' mental health charity. Kat has held senior leadership roles within NHS psychosis services and is currently pioneering intensive trauma therapy for veterans through her partner organisation, Vanguard CIC, developing a research trial to deliver concentrated treatment for those unable to access traditional long-term therapy. Kat's philosophy is clear and uncompromising. Standard wellness initiatives and surface-level interventions don't work in environments where the stakes are real, the pressure is constant, and asking for help often feels impossible. Kat, welcome to the show.
What an intro, my goodness.
Well, your work speaks for itself.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Nice, good to have you here. Let's start with what psychological risk really looks like inside high pressure systems.
So it really is a combination of the operational side building up across time, but also the resources between people and the ability to keep those roles ongoing for a long period diminishing as we go. So it's that combination really that starts to impact the psychology and the physical as well, the physiology side of it. So this is something that I talk a lot about because I feel that a lot of the time we think that PTSD is something that only happens in the mind, but it's not. It happens biologically also. And so when we talk about risk, what we're looking at is the physical side of it, the psychological and the emotional side of it. And that, as we grow across time, I think starts to deteriorate.
So you're looking at it as the impact on the whole person and the risk in maintaining those positions that have caused the problem in the first place, where their ability to do that high-pressured or fulfill that high-pressured role starts to diminish, and the impact that has not on them but also on the team, because that's a massive risk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, when we've got high risk operational roles, then you're subject to that exposure almost every day. If you think about military, where we deploy people for 4, 6, 8 months sometimes to war zones, then you're talking about a daily exposure to all of the potential traumatic situations that can happen. Now we look at police and fire services where that is happening daily. And so it's not a deployment anymore, not kind of taking away from either one, because both are just as difficult. But when it's the daily build up, I suppose we don't notice it as much. And so it's almost like a drip feed across time.
Because when you think about it, as you were just saying that, I was just thinking, yes, it's high pressured. And also the fire, the police, you never know what you're going to get on the day that you turn up to work. But that need for that high adrenaline almost to just continue to keep humming, what does that do to the nervous system of the body?
That's where we see a lot of hypervigilance issues later on, because you have to be hypervigilant to be able to stay alive. You've got to have that for survival. And so it's interesting because we have this conflict where the same training that keeps you alive is the one that at some stage may also be the thing that starts to deteriorate you. And so it's such a difficult concept to think that, okay, well, we've got to train people to be able to do these jobs and hold this level of adrenaline in their bodies for the long term. But then how do we come away from that? How do we then, coming back from a deployment, get to grips with that we're going around food shopping in Tesco and we're looking everywhere to see if there's a threat, but actually we haven't made that adjustment because our nervous system hasn't. And so that's really what we're saying, is that the training prepares you, but then it's hard then to come out of that.
It's almost like stepping off the wheel, right? In terms of, okay, that's what you need to keep you safe in that environment.
Yeah.
You're no longer in that environment, but your mind has been programmed to be in that environment, and you try and almost bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a conversation with a veteran the other day, and it went along the lines of, and this is so true, said they train you really well to be a soldier and they don't train you very well to be a civilian.
Yeah.
And that is that transition coming back from operational deployments and from the culture of the military. And the same thing, they're so interchangeable with frontline services. It's the same thing, really, that those kinds of cultures. And so again, it's almost that community aspect of it also. But you're not able to directly impact your physiology as much when it's been building up across time and your nervous system is keeping track of that.
Just a quick break from today's episode. If you've ever tried to get therapy, you know how frustrating it can be. You're finally ready to talk to someone, but you've been stuck on a waiting list for months. That's not how mental health support should work. Omnia Therapy makes getting help simple. You can book a session with a fully qualified professional in just 24 hours. No waiting, no contracts, just real support when you need it. And at £40 per session is actually affordable. If you're struggling, don't wait. Tap the link in the show notes or head to omniahealthgroup.com to book your session today. And earlier on when you were speaking, one thought that came to my mind was, when people are deployed, as you said, for 6, 8, 9 months, they're in that environment, there's the high pressure, there's the trauma of what they're seeing, and there's almost this expectation, I suppose, that you just keep going and you keep ploughing through and you do your job as a soldier. Then the risk of that person that isn't quite feeling it, or their nervous system has got the better of them and they might freeze in certain situations or what have you. How does the environment make it so that the person is able to come forward and say, I'm struggling?
I think it's very difficult, to be honest. And I'm glad that we're moving more towards accepting that this is an issue and a problem for a lot of people, and that we've got a bit more support and resources available than we did even just a couple of decades ago. So we have a bit more resource, which is great. However, there's a big mindset around seeking help and a big cultural stigma still associated with it, So we're not quite there in terms of overcoming the stigma attached, and especially because the community, I suppose, really, it's almost like, well, I can't be seen as weak, It's one of those that I keep hearing time and time again. And as a trauma therapist, I can tell you there is nothing weak about somebody coming to me to say, I need to face the things that have been the darkest times of my life again, to be able to overcome them.
It's funny that, because I had a conversation this week actually, and then I've had that conversation and it's led to me having that conversation sort of multiple times throughout the week, because it was along the lines of exactly that. People see that if you're going to go for therapy, you're weak or there's something wrong with you. When actually it's not that at all. It's a strength, and it takes a courage to be able to notice that actually what I'm experiencing isn't good for me. I'm not feeling good. But there is a tool out there that can help me unpick it, reduce the feelings that I'm feeling. And as a result of it, I'm going to grow and I'm going to develop at the end of it. But yet we're still stuck in this mindset that there's a weakness around therapy. And it's so frustrating because obviously, as we know, it isn't that. But yet attitudes are still on that path.
Yeah, I think that it's unfortunate, I would say, because again, if people just knew what awaits on the other side of therapy, they would hopefully be more encouraged to be able to make that step to begin with. And I don't think that they really understand what it might look like a lot of the time, and they are very hesitant to face the unknown, as we all are. You know, we don't like the uncertain, we don't like the unfamiliar, and that is both. And it's almost like the certainty of what I'm feeling is better than stepping into somebody's office and saying, I need help with this.
Yeah.
You know?
But even as you said earlier, the thought of having to reprocess the negative experience again. I hear this a lot as well. Oh, I don't want to dredge all that up. I've dealt with it. It's gone. And I've boxed it away. But that boxing away, how long can that work for?
Well, I mean, this is quite clear. I talked about this last month on stage, and I literally started with that. So, you know, why can't I lock it away anymore in that box that's now become a jack in the box? And I've heard that phrase so many times over that it was the reason that I started my talk there, because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It works in the short term, but I'm guaranteeing you that that box is getting full across time. And the longer that we leave it, the more that these responses become embedded. And the more that we build up almost like little other responses upon already what's going on underneath, you know? And so the longer that we wait, the worse that it is. And it's just not going to go away on its own. That's a myth. It's just like, oh, well, if I just ignore it, it'll go away. And I can tell you that it doesn't. You know, the nervous system doesn't forget.
No, it doesn't. It's funny, you use the jack in the box, or it's been used, you've used it. I always sort of use Pringles. You push it into the Pringles can, you push it, and eventually it
just
pops and comes out sideways. And that's how it works.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's the same thing, really. You know, I guess it's just whatever you relate to, but we're both saying the same thing. Like whatever you're trying to like shove down, it won't stay there, unfortunately. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've seen this movie so many times now that I just want to change the ending for you, you know?
And this is always one of my thought processes, is that our brain is programmed to feel the emotions, but we've come into a culture or an environment or society, the world, where you push things away, or through like jobs like the military, the police, or what have you, where you just push it down to forget about it, because you've just got to get on and you've got to show that it's not impacting you and you're not fazed by it and you're not really feeling it. So for how long can someone stop their brain doing what it's meant to be doing, which is feel those emotions?
Yeah, but I think that we're so good at pushing those to one side and numbing a lot of the time. You know, we use other sources to regulate our emotions. That's going to be work, it's going to be drinking sometimes, it's going to be exercise, whatever your method of choice is, it doesn't really matter. But what people don't understand is that when they numb one emotion, so if that's fear or sadness or anger, any one of those, it numbs out all of the emotions. So joy starts to then go as well, you know, and then they're just not understanding why they can't remember when they last felt happy. It's like, well, you've become so used to numbing everything and pushing everything to one side. It's no wonder that you can't feel now any emotion as opposed to just the negative ones. We can't select.
Yeah. And it's funny actually, because I always say this, we've almost come from that place where we're expected to always be happy. Happy. We've got always... Actually, no, we don't. No. We can have a sad day.
Yeah.
We can have a down day.
Yeah.
We can have a day where we might feel a bit angry or upset or sad. But there's this almost cultural expectation that everyone has to be up here. And it's again, how can you keep striving for that if you're not feeling that?
I think that also there's a bit of an expectation that's quite vague. It's like, oh, well, let's just be happy.
Yeah.
What does that actually
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
though? That's why I always use joy instead of happiness, because you can find moments of joy in anything, really. But like this idea of, I just want to be happy, I'm like, when somebody says that to me, I'm just like, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah,
What does that mean
yeah.
to you,
Yeah.
But if you're talking about having moments where you enjoy life, where you get up in the morning and just having a nice coffee is a moment of joy or something, we can absolutely attain that,
Yeah.
But also just coming back to this idea of the emotions and numbing those out, we can't forget that this also may be a default setting from childhood, because a lot of the people that I treat, a lot of people in these jobs don't have the best of upbringings a lot of the time, and they might even be drawn to these jobs as a result of some of their backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, that comes back down to, like, if you look back in the day or when we were younger, or when, we weren't taught to show emotions. We weren't taught to express them. It wasn't the normal done thing, was it? You didn't speak about it. Now, like, my little one comes home from school, she's in primary school, and they will actively talk about sadness and happiness and mindfulness, and those things weren't really in our vocabulary.
Definitely not. I'm glad that we're heading towards this now, but also these were not available when I was growing up.
No.
And I grew up with a dad who worked in the prison service for 30 something years. So he was, his entire life, my upbringing, he was a prison officer. And so imagine that type of a job where really you're kind of having to face a lot of fear, a lot of anger, and that carried over into, and maybe something to do with why I'm in this field, psychoanalyzing myself there. But I think that, he did his best, but he was raising two girls and he didn't know, so I always joke that I was the son he never had, because it felt that way, but no, I don't think that we were really kind of taught that emotional language, and especially not in school, but also I think as best as our parents maybe did, maybe not home as well.
Yeah, because they didn't know any different.
Exactly.
They didn't know any different. I was talking to someone earlier about this, actually, and I was saying that there's also a little bit of a disconnection between those that are more open to the idea of exploring feelings and understanding them, and the younger generations are being taught that through schools. It's becoming part of their everyday language. But then there's still a disconnection, because if the generation that's their parent or grandparent or caregiver isn't following suit with that, there's still going to be a bit of a disconnection in the process, because at school they might be taught that language, but at home it might be down patted and they might be told, that's stupid, that's, oh, what a load of nonsense. So actually there's still going to be a little bit of a disconnection to believing that language.
Definitely. And I think that it's a struggle on both sides, I think, for parents, maybe grandparents also, to speak that language that kids now are being raised amongst, which we agree that is great, but also that can lead to conclusions about, well, just, pull your socks up and get on with it, and you're right, there's a complete disconnection in terms of like, well, we're just raising snowflakes. I've heard that a lot, I'm just kind of like, can we find a balance in between, somewhere between, like, fair enough, adversity does give you resilience, but equally we need to acknowledge that we are humans with emotions.
Yeah. Just a quick break from today's episode. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: mental health at work. If you run a business, you've probably seen it. Stress, burnout, employees who aren't performing at their best because they're struggling. The problem? Most companies don't know how to address mental health in a way that actually helps their team. That's where Omnia Corporate Training comes in. We provide CPD certified mental health training that's practical, flexible, and designed to fit into any workplace. If you want to invest in your team's well-being, and let's be real, happy employees perform better, tap the link in the show notes or visit omniahealthgroup.com to learn more. So we've discussed psychological risk. But what does psychological risk management mean, and how is that different from your usual approaches?
I realize this is quite wordy for people that don't understand and aren't in my field. For us, like psychological risk management is a part of our everyday, right? We're looking at a person's risk profile. We're looking at the risks that might be static, the ones that are ongoing, and then the ones that might be dynamic, which are like sudden, unexpected ones. Now, when I've been used to managing this level of risk for almost a decade and a half, I think for me it comes very second nature. But for people that don't understand it, I understand that it might be a bit long-winded. What it really means is you're monitoring those risk factors and you're looking at somebody's risk profile all the time. And not just as a somebody, I mean an organization.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at a team, for example, recently I did some work with a police force and we did work with some of their high-risk units. And when I say high risk, is because their exposure is high risk. So you're talking about digital forensics teams, crime scene investigation, like those types of teams, safeguarding, child safeguarding. Those teams are exposed daily to some of the most distressing, darkest type of content that we can really think about, other than being a trauma therapist, I suppose, you know? So when I'm looking at those teams, I'm thinking, okay, so you've been doing this job now for same amount of time that I have, 15 years. And every single day that, you know, content, you're viewing it and you're having to categorize it. And so at what point does this become a lot, you know? And so that's the risk profile that I'm looking at. And what I propose is to assess that person every year at least, or every 6 months, even if things are starting to show, to make sure that we're not getting to that point where it's going to start meeting that threshold and we're going to start. So it's prevention in terms of we're preventing the crisis from happening. We can't prevent PTSD sometimes because it's going to happen. If you see something and in that moment it stays with you, that's going to happen. We can prevent the decline. And that is what risk management is about for me. So we're also training people on warning signs, on symptoms, on monitoring themselves so they can know what to look out for also. So it's a combination of assessment, training, and then treatment, obviously, as well.
Yeah. So it's like a all-rounded. So you're giving them the psychoeducation of what to look out for, what to notice within themselves. You're looking at the assessment of the individual and their experience, what they're going through, the risk that they're presenting with, perhaps, and as well as looking at the team as a whole. And it's that education piece, isn't it?
It is really. And also, we can't forget that the organizational issues also come into it. You know, I delivered a training for senior leadership in the police, and I use something called the Police Traumatic Events Checklist. And that is where it also takes into account the organizational issues that can come in and can affect somebody, you know, because I've worked in organizations like the NHS, for example, and you get a lot of varieties of leadership and, you know, things happen also there. And so you've got to look at, obviously, just the job, the actual job itself is exposure enough, but then what's going on in the background. And I realize that this is a lot to think about, but that is how I view psychological risk management.
Why do standard wellness initiatives often fail in high pressure organizations?
These are so well intended, and you know, I don't want to piss anyone off by saying that they don't work, because I think there's still something rather than nothing.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes, you know, at least in the services that I've worked, they can be a bit of a tick box. You know, it's like, oh, well, we've met the wellbeing day, and it's like, I don't think you have, you know, so.
This is my line that I'm going with at the moment. There's this corporate need to tick boxes that don't actually tick any boxes, because it's a provision, but it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's just a show.
Yeah, that's the thing. But because mental health has become so high now and on the agenda, I think that every organization, definitely in corporates and things, they need to show that they're ticking the box, you know, and that they're putting on some well-being days. And like I said, I've got nothing against that. I just think that in these types of operational environments, a well-being day is not enough.
Yeah.
You know, especially knowing what I know about how risk builds up over time. And so for me, I'd much rather a structured training program that's going to address the leadership aspect, the psychoeducation aspect, and then monitor people across time, you know?
Yeah. So it's actually giving them something tangible that they can work with, grow from, develop.
Yeah.
Rather than just a day off for a duvet day.
Yeah, very much. That's a new thing.
Yeah,
that never used
duvet
to...
day. Yeah, it's like, really? Yeah, that's an initiative that I hear a lot, duvet day. Yeah.
Love that, but no.
Yeah. Because, again, I mean, you started me off on that one, but allowing someone whose mental health isn't great a day to just sit under their duvet and isolate and be alone, how beneficial is that going to be for someone that's feeling low? It's not going to be, is it?
Isolation is one of the biggest factors that increases mental health issues, to be honest. We all saw this during COVID, right? And we knew our service at the time. So I was working in a psychosis service all through COVID. I've never worked more hours or harder in my life because it was all hands on deck, and we were considered a tier 1 service, so we still had to go out and see people. I say we, but I was a psychologist, so I was still seeing people online, but the operational team were going out dressed in their full gear to see people, because psychosis is that line between admission. And so so it's really difficult. And then as a result of that, oh gosh, after that was picking up the pieces after that. And I happened to go into running the psychology service after COVID, and we had 6 months straight of incidents. And I was trying to keep just everyone from not breaking down as a result of what we were seeing, and staff having to learn that somebody had either attempted or succeeded in ending their lives. And so it was a rough time, and that came from isolation.
In environments like emergency services, prisons, or the military, what stops people from asking for help?
A lot of the time it is fear. I'll be honest. Whether we want to admit that or not, we fear what is unknown and uncertain. We also don't particularly want to sit down and talk about the worst moments of our lives. And another component of that is the culture, the worry around being labelled, and also the worry around not being able to do your job. It is all of those factors combined. It's not as easy as one thing, but those are the things that will lead somebody to wait 14 years to ask for help. It's devastating.
And just keep struggling in silence and keep plowing through because of that fear, because of that label, because of that concern, I suppose, even for their position in their place of employment. Am I going to miss the next promotion because I've admitted that I've got this problem? Is that going to hold me back?
Absolutely. And so that is why I am a proponent of regular screening, because they have physical health screening all the time. Why are we not doing that for psychological health? Just put it in the diary. Every 12 months, you get a mandatory psychological assessment, And look, fair enough. People are going to lie. They're going, because it's happened to me so much, I'm just kind of like, that's fine. But at least we're trying to make an effort to give them that opportunity. To be able
give them that space at least because they might fill in the form, and in the form they might sort of make it look like it's all rainbows and fluffy clouds. But then when you give them the space to sit and speak, they might then think, actually, this is my opportunity, and look, it comes out.
That's where I find the training environment is much more open. That is the difference that I've noticed across, again, just working with people when they've not come to me for treatment necessarily, but I'm working with the organisation, and I might have assessed somebody and they've not been very forthcoming, but then I've run a training session with them, and amazing some of the things that, and I will lead with my experiences, because again, I'm a human, and so it's like we've obviously had, again, within the psychosis service, within the prison service, these are high stress environments. Things can go sideways very quickly, And so you've got to understand that these things are going to stay with you from time to time. So you just got to you're a human. It's going to happen. There's no other way about it, to be honest.
Yeah. You need to acknowledge those experiences, understand that they're going to have a place for the impact that they're going to have on you. We can't change that.
Definitely.
But trying to ignore them and pretend they didn't happen isn't the solution either.
No, not at all. And then especially when it impacts the family. The family members are the ones that when I talk to veterans a lot of the time, they've come to combat stress because their families have noticed a decline. They might not even be aware sometimes, but they know something's off.
Because then I suppose, is it that the mask that they put on at work to protect themselves so that they look like they've got it all together, that comes off when they go home. And that's when, I suppose, that Jack in the Box, the Pringles, that's where it pops, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing that I would say is that we have this idea about not wanting to burden our family and those around us, and I relate really because, again, I've chosen to do my job. My family around me didn't choose that necessarily, or partner or anything like that. So it's not their fault that I deal with the content that I deal with on a daily basis. However, it is on me to not shut off completely. It's like I don't want to share, and I can't anyway. My work is confidential, but if I've had something really heavy that day, like a high risk situation that I'm worried about, I'm not going to openly talk about that, but I'll be quieter, for example. And so we've got to understand that it is on us at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's so important doing the job that we do to have those rituals in place to protect ourselves as well, because it's there's ups and downs. I suppose there's ups and downs with any job, but sometimes it can be harder to deal with than others.
And you'll find this also. You've got to know your strategies. You've got to know what really keeps you. Like, I'm talking about them, but I'm including myself in here. I've been doing this job for a long time now. What keeps me doing this job? Well, I know that training is a really big part of my life. Connecting with people, just people that really kind of nourish you. Like those
your
conversations.
Cup up.
And so those are the kinds of things that I know work consistently for me. So as long as I keep doing those, I'll be okay. Yeah.
Nice. Just a quick break from today's episode. Have you ever felt like the kind of support you need just doesn't exist? Maybe you need help outside of normal hours. Maybe you don't even know where to start. That's why Omnia Neurodiscovery exists. We offer specialised, flexible mental health support, including intensive evening and weekend packages for people who need something different. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, don't wait. Tap the link in the show notes or visit omniahealthgroup.com to find out how we can help. So, you know what this means. However, would you mind sharing a little bit more of your insight into moral injury, please?
Moral injury is something that perhaps is or has traditionally been talked about less, but is a real significant factor in military and frontline services. And this is where something conflicts with your own values, with your own ethics and morals. So something could be something that you did or something that you didn't do. For example, that's the simplest way to kind of go about it. But also a sense of betrayal can come into it. And that could be a sense of betrayal from maybe either your team or the organization, for example. I think a lot of frontline staff do feel quite betrayed by the organization. I know that I had my moments when I was working in the NHS, and if we think about the doctors on the front line during COVID, for example, they had to make awful decisions that went against their morals and their ethics. And so in a nutshell, this is something that we also come across a lot that really weighs very heavily on people, but might not necessarily be associated with a traditional PTSD diagnosis.
Yeah. Because I suppose that could really leave someone with the same feelings, right? In terms of replaying it over and over and again, getting triggered from a similar experience coming up. But that disconnection between what feels right, what is right, what was done, what wasn't done, and that going around again and again and again and again. And then, as you say, if there's then a disconnection between you and the workplace in which you've had to make that decision, which either they're for or against.
Yeah.
That's a whole different ballgame, isn't it?
Yeah, it sits uncomfortably with you, you know? It's almost like, and the best descriptions I can give were, for example, on the front line during COVID, and also in some of the conflicts that we've had where the rules of engagement were very different. So for example, in quote unquote peacekeeping, conflicts like Bosnia, for example, you know, there were a lot of things that happened that we weren't able to intervene, and that sat very, very uncomfortably with a lot of people. But you're supposed to be doing this job, right? And you're a doctor and you're supposed to be saving lives, but you're now making a decision between whose life to save.
Yeah.
All of those things start to also wear us down, and that can lead to a sense of betrayal from the organization as well.
Yeah, yeah. And working through it, and who do you turn to? How do you explain that to someone? Who's listening? Who cares?
Yeah, well, I care.
Yeah, that's it.
But the guilt and the shame that can come through, and then it is a spiral if we're not careful, you know, because we're in caring professions a lot of the time. You know, we do the work that we do because we care about people, whether that's you're a soldier or a police officer or a firefighter, it doesn't really matter. And I think that when you're not able to help, that is the hardest thing, I think, for somebody in this work.
Because then I suppose you even start to question what's the point in any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a difficult spiral, really difficult. But I wanted to talk about this particular area because it's less talked about, and it's something that's very prevalent, I think.
So at the beginning of the week, you were kind enough to share with me the talk that you did, which I really enjoyed. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a talk that I wrote called Before They Break, and it's all about early intervention before that point.
Yeah.
And I was able to tell the story with permission from a veteran that I worked with who, classic alpha male, you know, confident leader, just, you know, one of those guys that everybody wants on the team, and did 6 years in the army, 17 years in the police. A lot of those were in armed response because of his skills from the army. Thought everything was going fine, and then gradually, like, that deterioration happened that I talk about. And so I shared his story, and I shared some of the elements that helped with his recovery. And it was great to be able to tell that story and to be able to share the recovery journey of somebody that is very typically the person that you would get in these teams. And I'm talking about male and female, by the way, because the women are, you know, also just as alpha as the men. And it's very difficult for them to also accept. So it went, you know, really, really well. I sent it to him once we had got the recording as well, back edited and everything else. And he said, I can't believe that was me that you were talking about. He said, my life is so much more rewarding now and fulfilling. And, you know, and it was great because I wanted him to see it before I published it.
Yeah, of course.
And it was, again, just talking about what my view of early intervention is, which is the psychological screening, the training, and also intensive trauma-focused therapy, which is something that we are now providing more routinely. And intensive therapy is something that we've kind of had, but not in the format that we've got it now. So Combat Stress pioneered this a few years ago. And I mean, in the beginning, we were delivering 36 hours of therapy in 3 weeks. That was at the start. So that is a lot of therapy. That is 9 months in 3 weeks. And so as we've gone along now, I think we're doing 24 hours in 2 weeks. And so what we've seen is that in that short space of a time, because of the momentum of therapy, things get resolved so much quicker. And you don't have this kind of weekly, you know, dread.
Ongoing.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it is rough. Like those couple of weeks are gonna be tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
For the client, but also for us, for clinicians, it's exhausting work, but so rewarding as well. And so I talked about his story, and I also then ended it with the fact that he has got a new lease of life. You know, when he sent me that email just to say that he'd got his relationship with his daughter back, that he was able to sleep again, all of these things aren't talked about a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I took my opportunity in that
Nice.
one. Yeah.
Really nice.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was. It was. Do you know, as you say, I think it's noticing the impact that it can have and the change on somebody's life. And I suppose for you getting that email back, you probably got that warm, fuzzy feeling of, wow, I was able to help this client do that, as much as the client was brave enough to go on that journey, but they trusted you to go on that journey with them. And now they're reaping the rewards and they're living a good life on the back of it.
Definitely. And I think that was also part of why I shared his particular story, because the trust, he was very skeptical at the beginning, right? And for me, I guess I'm very matter of fact when it comes to this. And I'm just like, look, do you want to get better or do you not? Because if you want to get better, I'm all in.
Yeah.
But if you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, you might as well leave, because that's not how I work. You know, when I go all in on something, I go all in, but you've got to be in there with me. And I will get you to the other side. But you've got to be there in that darkness for a while, you know? And so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I suppose that directness kind of resonated with him. And, you know, I'm very privileged to be able to do the work that I do. And he put his trust in me and we got him to the other side. And that I knew that all along, right? So, but it was his courage and his determination. Like I said to him, I was like, I'm just the guide. But you were able to put your trust, and because you did, this is the outcome. You know, so yeah, absolutely. So it's great for me. Yeah, oh yeah, that line that he put in the email that I talk about in the talk, you were born to do this work. Oh my goodness, honestly, that hit me right, right in that little soft part of my heart, which is hard to get sometimes. But yeah, it was great, and he's doing really well. And I was just glad to be able to share his story. To be honest, I was, you know, really, really grateful.
Nice. So, Kat, thank you for bringing clarity, realism, and depth to a topic that's often softened or oversimplified. Your work highlights that psychological risk isn't about fragility, it's about exposure, systems, and responsibility. Before we close, what final message would you want leaders, decision makers, or frontline workers listening today to take away?
I will start with the leaders, and what I would say is I urge you to get an early intervention infrastructure within the organization, because you're losing really good people and there's no need for it. Those officers that are high performing, they don't need to decline. If only we just put systems in place, that would be great. For people in service or who have been either military or frontline, what I would say is please don't wait. Don't wait until those symptoms start getting out of hand, because by then it's already too late to be able to undo some of the responses that are happening. And it's not impossible, because resolution will happen, but it will be much harder. So the earlier, the better. It's like when you get a physical health diagnosis, you want to intervene at stage 1, not stage 4, right? That is what I would say to them. And then finally, to the families, is keep an eye. Keep an eye on your loved ones, because if you feel that something is off, it genuinely will be. And they are the ones they're the heroes, really. They're the ones that push people towards help. And so that is my message for the families also.
Nice, thank you. To our audience, thank you for joining us on the Silent Epidemic. Join us next time as we continue unpacking the realities shaping mental health, trauma, and resilience in the systems we rely on most.